Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode, another podcast edition of Public Comment, where I like to chat about politics and philosophy for critical, creative, and introspective thinkers. That's where it's at. And a few things that I plan on chatting about today. I should always tell you, it's one thing to have an agenda, it's another to be natural, like jazz, and let things go where they may. So that's sort of my style. But I do have a bit of an agenda. I would like to chat with you about definitions of philosophy. A friend of mine, Raheen Ambrose, him and I are engaged in a bit of a debate or discussion about what the proper definition may or may not be, why or why not. I do want to briefly tell you about a weird dream I had. I'm not one to really interpret a dream or find much meaning in dreams, but it was very baffling and unsettling in a way, so I did want to bring that up to you. I also want to talk about the psychological experience of entrepreneurial endeavors. I mean, I'm trying to make it as a podcaster. And what's that all about? What does that encompass? And why think about it? Why talk about it out loud? Why share that with you is something that I want to address. And also, I'd like to, therefore, get into the aesthetics of talking, because that is what I'm doing here, is chatting with you. And therefore, if I'm going to be doing that, I should certainly be mindful of what it is I determine I'm going to chat with you about, and what makes that worth your time or worth recording even. Why or why not? So those are some of the things that I hope to get through this during this session, if you will, this podcast edition, this episode. A little break from what I had been doing before. In the last episode, I was revisiting this sort of longer going series of what it means to move someplace or live someplace better. So basically, with respect to format, one of the things that I like to do is I like to go on different streams and talk about different subjects and continue on with things and develop them as is appropriate when it so happens that I've got more to add to it or I'm ready to add to it. So at the end of the day, when my job is done here on this earth, in this universe, in the human form, you could essentially organize all of this either chronologically, which is something I find very interesting, or by topic, still chronologically, but chronologically by topic as opposed to pure chronology. I find the chronology of a person very interesting. I find autobiography, memoir, personal essay, those kinds of subjects very interesting. Understanding the soul of a person and the development of a person. So, not to jump ahead too much, but that's sort of like what motivates me here, is I like to just share and keep the record and make a responsible record, if you will, an intellectually contribution-worthy record. What makes something contribution-worthy or not, that's a conversation we've got to get into, that I will get into. But I want to begin. Actually, instead of jumping right to definitions of philosophy, I actually want to tell you about this weird dream I had last night. It was one of the weirdest dreams I've ever had, just in its imagery. So it goes like this. I am still working at the tutoring center, and who does it turn out that one of my coworkers is? But the former mayor of New York City. Yes, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. And in this dream, I have an immediate aversion to him, knowing that he, right, has this record of, well, irrational defenses, contradictory attempts at sort of defending Donald Trump on TV. He is now known for saying truth is not truth. So he puts himself on record as sort of an ultimate sophist of sorts. So why would I want to even share space with him? But in this dream, I guess we are just sort of stuck at this table together. And though I have these views of Mayor Giuliani because of his history on TV and the way he has presented himself and the lack of character and disregard for truth and ethics that he has presented himself as possessing. But I'm stuck at this table with him and decide to chat with him. And I'm thinking about how he used to be mayor, and I'm thinking about I'm thinking about my old mayor when I lived in East Windsor, Janice Mirnoff, and how it's kind of interesting that he's just sitting there at this table and he's willing to chat with me and is just starting this conversation with me. I don't remember what the conversation is. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I certainly know what I do think of this fellow, but let me engage in conversation with him. Certainly, it could be interesting to know what he might share. So I do get involved in these sort of probing questions. I ask Mayor Giuliani about contracts and the complexity of contracts and questions of government corruption and all these things. And at some point, then I wake up. There's a little bit more to the dream, but that's the gist of it, and that's the very strange part of it. I have never dreamed of Mayor Giuliani before. I do have my dreams about politics, but I've never dreamt about another mayor other than Mayor Janice Mirnoff, my own mayor from East Windsor. So he would only be the second mayor I've ever had a dream about. And I don't usually dream so much about politicians. I've had a few dreams about Trump. I may have had a dream or two about Obama. But this would be one of the most... this is a dream about a prominent person. Dreams are very interesting. Of course, I don't really take so much from dreams. I don't know about you. For me, a dream doesn't have all that much meaning. For me, as I understand it, a dream is sort of like a roll of the dice with the stuff in your mind. I could be wrong. There's no science to back up that speculation. That said, the last time I reviewed the textbooks on the question of dreams, there were a number of theories, though not much of a substantive, authoritative consensus on exactly what is the meaning of dreams, other than that they don't necessarily mean that much. So I do sort of share my understanding of the mainstream scientific view. Though I know there are people who think that dreams could be like a sign from God, an intuitive read of what's to come, or like some sort of message to be decoded from your soul. Used to be, several years ago, probably about end of 2011, fall of 2011, what I liked to do was jot down my dreams and then judge them. And I thought that one purpose that dreams could offer is just a sort of like almost like a wake up exercise of your reason. Would you really do the things that you dreamed? Do you agree with the assumptions the dream version of you had, or that the assumptions other people had in your dream? Do you agree with the ethics in the dream? Do you agree with the metaphysical assumptions that you make in this dream? I just don't know. Anyway, this was the dream that I had, and I would not really have too much interest in chatting with Mayor Giuliani. I suppose if he said, hey, let me, come and interview me, I suppose I would interview him and take the opportunity to ask him questions. I would ask, why did you say that truth is not truth? And what do you mean by that? Can you elaborate? Are you a sophist? Why do you support Donald Trump, really? Those are things I'd like to know from him. But, I don't know, is there some sort of deeper meaning from the dream? If I were old Sean, back during my subjective time, I would be like paranoid that this was some sort of sign that I had slipped into evil somehow. But I just don't read so much into dreams. I think if we really read too much into our dreams, we'd probably drive ourselves crazy. Sometimes we dream some weird stuff, don't we? I don't know, let me hear from you guys. Do you read so much from your dreams? Have you ever had dreams that have utterly disturbed you? Dreams you would never tell anybody you even had. Perhaps we've all had those dreams. There's this great line by Bob Dylan in one of his songs, and he says, "If my thought dreams could be seen, they'd probably put my head in a guillotine. But it's all right, Ma. It's life and life only." Good line. But I think we've all... everything that exists in the human consciousness, not all of it is made for consumption, right? Not all of it is thought in its most constructive and aesthetically valuable, or even practically valuable form. It's like, sometimes the content in your mind is like writing, or the elements of some sort of sketch, draft, as opposed to a final product. That what makes the final product so beautiful. So that's why I don't really take so much from dreams. But I'll say this, getting into a conversation about art, and thereby aesthetics and philosophy too, is that another thing that I think about dreams, and as I was telling you about dreams and how I think it is interesting to sort of judge your dreams, because it's a sort of exercise, sort of waking up of your intellectual faculties in a way when you remember those dreams, and you've got the time and energy to assess them a little bit if you can. Dreams, in a way, are like works of art. Very similar, because anybody can produce in a work of art whatever their imagination can come up with, can they not? And sometimes it's weird, and it's a work of art you wouldn't want to imagine was real. Other times you do wish it was real, quite like a dream. I find there to be just a really fascinating relationship between dreams and art. I just go one step further and say that the one distinct difference between a dream and a work of art is that, to me, a dream is like a constructive daydream. Or rather, a work of art is like a constructive daydream and or contemplation, whereas a dream, I'm not sure how conscious that really is at all. It's probably unconscious and just a totally different thing, but from both we can perhaps draw some similar value and mental contemplative exercises, I would say. So now, conversations about philosophy. Why am I bringing this up to you in the first place? Well, obviously I like to chat about philosophy. I am sort of inherently a philosophical person for as long as I can remember. But I have this friend, his name is Raheen Ambrose. We went to college together, and he put up this Facebook post. And he said in this Facebook post, he said, "Stop letting philosophy answer your question. It becomes science when answered." And I found myself in immediate disagreement with the ideas behind this Facebook post. I'm a little different than Raheen in that I don't think that philosophy is about just being left with lingering questions and no degree of confidence in something. I don't share that view. I don't believe in 100% certainty in anything, and you could read about that on my website, publiccomment.blog. I have an entire lexicon which I'm developing where you'll find some basic concepts that I adhere to that I think might help elaborate that viewpoint that I have. So we get into this back and forth of why he has the definition he has, and I offer a definition that I got from the Oxford Dictionary, which said that philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. And he told me he didn't like that definition, that it was too vague. And he suggested the Philosopher's Toolkit book. And I said, why read that textbook? Or I don't even know if it's a textbook, what kind of book it is. When I asked him why read it, he did not give me an answer to that question. Instead, he said, just read. So I'm here to offer the thought, Raheen, that if it is a book that you believe with conviction is something I ought to take seriously, maybe you might want to say a few things to its favor, to its legitimacy, because certainly I'm not one to just tell someone to just read a book because they should just read it. Just because. That's, in fact, I don't know how many of you are out there who have those people who say to you, you know how we all have our own lists of media we want to consume, right? You've got the podcasts you want to listen to, you've got the movies you want to watch, the TV shows you want to binge, you've got the articles you want to read, the books you want to read or listen to on audio. We all have like a list, consciously or unconsciously, but we've all got our agendas and our interests, right? But then someone always tells you, you've just got to read this book. You've just got to watch this movie. You've just got to listen to this musical artist. And on the one hand, you do want to respect your dear friend and say, well, you are my friend and I value your aesthetics, I value your taste, I value your interests. Oh, sure. But what is it that makes one think that your friend or somebody is going to just put aside their entire reading list, their entire way of, their entire agenda and say, oh, okay, you and everybody else is telling me I must read this, so forget anything that I was reading, right? But I'm just going to stop hell, heaven and earth, and pay umbrage to your one thing that you say I must read, which you will not take the time to tell me why I should read it. I just don't share that viewpoint. If I want you to read something, I'll go out of my way to advocate for offering. I'll go out of my way to offer a case for it. I'm not saying I necessarily would write you a book review, but if it was something that I thought is a must, I think I would take the time to really offer a rationale. I think having rationales really well defined and logical rationales, I think that's integral to like how we ought to think and be. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily controversial or anything. And I'm just saying that if we're going to have some dispute on what a person should read, we should tell them why they should read it. If we really care that they read it or not. I mean, it's one thing if you don't really care. But if you really believe strongly, so strongly in, say, the definition of philosophy, then if you really believe strongly in it, shouldn't that be treated just like, research would be treated, and that you would really offer a sort of synthesis on all you know on the topic and show why what you've arrived at is the best based on your synthesis and research? That's how I might try to do it. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I am saying these are live streaming talks, so I'm going to be ridden with inevitable contradictions and things I probably regret, but such is life. How many of you, as you go through your day, at some point step back and you're like, oh, wish I didn't say that. Wish I could take it back. Maybe it bothers you and you never address it, revisit it. Maybe you do. I try to, but again, look, I'm not going to be the kind of person who dares to suggest to you that he's perfect. I don't view myself with like some sort of exceptional high horse ivory tower kind of thing. I don't really view myself so much, other than like in the act of introspection here. I do offer some senses of myself, or as is relevant, but I don't. I believe in the philosophy I have. I believe in my convictions. You may prove them wrong in time, or I may discover they're wrong, but I don't mean to act as if I think I'm so perfect, because I am certainly not. As would be evident by the next thing that I want to chat with you about, which is this the psychological experience of an entrepreneurial endeavor. It's going to be different for all of us. There's actually a broader theme I want to get to here. If I could just be so blunt about it, is this. I believe in striving for your dreams in life. I believe in being extraordinarily ambitious. I believe in aiming as high as is reasonable into your desires. Asking yourself, what do I really want? And part of it, I think, can be entrepreneurial. That is to say, I think it's fair to ask, really ask yourself, how in the world would I love to make money? If I could. And, it's worth vetting. Is it a reasonable ambition? Not to discourage yourself, though. I think that, so I'm bringing this up in part because I'm trying to be upfront about my own desire to offer you thoughts to such a extent of some form of value to you that it would become a way that I could make my living. And thinking about what that means on a personal level. Of course, there's other aspects of this. So I was thinking, for example, about how I would like to make my family, I would like to interest my family more in my work. Did you talk in your families about your work? In my family, some of us do and some of us don't. Certainly, my siblings don't talk that much about their work. I don't even talk to my siblings as much as I would like to. Love them all dearly. I love everybody in my family. I'm really mad lucky when it comes to family, because I really do love everybody in my family, I have to say. I wasn't always the most lovable member of the family. I suffered through some mad anxiety and depression, and that came with like a lot of anger and bitterness and envy and jealousy and insecurity, and therefore actually a lot of avoidance based on some of those emotions too. So it did not really have the kinds of relationships. I didn't start the kinds of relationships I would have liked to start. And so I think I would have wished that I could have, when I was younger, have developed the kind of relationships with my family members where there could have been a lot more give and take about, you're doing this and I'm doing that, and here's my thoughts on how you can advance what you're doing, and here's your thoughts on how I could advance what I'm doing, and work to such a point where I had my family believing in me a little bit more. Not to say that they don't, or that I get the impression that they don't. That's not what I mean to say at all. I tell you, I was probably a more intense supporter. For example, when I ran for political office, my mother was super supportive and gung-ho and really awesome, and as were other members of my family. So I'm not trying to what I'm not saying is that I experienced from lack of support. That's not quite where I'm going with this. What I am trying to say, though, is that I think it would be interesting to have more back and forth with friends and family about what they're doing and what I'm doing, and I would certainly like to interest people in what I'm doing more, and I'm thinking about what that means to talk about one's activities. It was a common thing when I say, when someone says, oh, so what are you doing these days? And I say, oh, I'm podcasting, I've got this website. And they say, yeah, but what else are you doing? That the assumption there is, well, it's okay for Rachel Maddow to be on MSNBC. That's her main thing. But, for Sean O'Connor, the podcast isn't his main thing because you just can't believe in it, or you're cynical, or because, well, part of it is my fault, actually. You might be the kind of person who views me as all over the place, in that I've changed my mind about exactly how I was going to approach a lot of things. Interestingly, though, I think in the end all, it just turns out that we live in more of a multimedia world where people are tying in a lot of more multimedia efforts. And so, if sometimes I've been on a little bit more of a creative writing bent, if sometimes I've been a little bit more of a political activism bent, sometimes I've been a little bit more of a philosophy bent, if sometimes I've been a little bit more of this or that, I think that has more to do with the nature of actually grappling with the kind of culture we live in, and how it's all going to come together, and that there will be more of integrative, probably, activities that I think millennials and Generation Z and people who are really in tune with how the economy is moving, I think there's going to be some of that. Some people call it the gig economy, where you just have to work multiple gigs to make a reasonable income. I don't know that it has to be that, but I believe that, like, when I was younger, we didn't have this inundation of social media. We didn't have this inundation of social media news feeds thrusting themselves on our consciousnesses. We just didn't. The depth of the media that I remember being exposed to as a kid was like just TV and commercials, a little bit of internet. But when I was really young, the internet was still just dial-up, and as a kid, you dialed on to AOL for an hour when your parents let you, and you didn't do too much on it, really. So my point being that the sort of multimedia reality 20 years ago is not the same as it is today. Point being that I understand that people might think of Sean O'Connor as this guy who's sort of all over the place with his creative outputs, and that therefore it looks like he's actually not been up to anything cohesive. But I'm here to argue that, I apologize for coming across to you, ladies and gentlemen, if perhaps I've not been able to, as if I've been flaky and not able to make a decision in life, being all over the place with my productivity. I say actually what I've been trying to do is learn how to integrate in a much more hyper multimedia context than used to exist, and that I'm actually finally getting a hang on it. And believe it or not, this whole talking podcast thing has been extraordinarily helpful as I'm putting it all together. I can't even begin to tell you, because part of it is I just have this genetic need to talk. My mom knows that probably better than anybody. My mom has said I have the gift of gab. I don't know if I've got a gift for it, but I do gab a lot. I talk a lot. Love to talk, and I think a lot. So being able to talk a lot about my thoughts is really nice. And it probably stops me from writing emails as verbose as my emails have tended to be, because there's just so many things I'm always wanting to say that never get said. And to finally be able to say them is just sort of like a wonderful thing. And I think there are aesthetic values to this as much as practical ones. But where I wanted to go with that is this. This is a sort of business thing, though. Just like, and what I find really interesting about podcasts, it's one thing if you're watching the video, and I can't imagine anyone is watching the video for more than like a 5 to 10, maybe 15-minute clip tops. I know most people don't really like long YouTube videos or Facebook videos, so this is more of just a way to, for those who might want to watch the video archive or the video record. I am obsessed with archiving things. I am just record crazy. I've got boxes of notebooks going back to when I was like 13 of things that I've written and such. I've got movies that I made from when I was like 11. So my point being, yeah, I'm pretty obsessed with archiving stuff. It is a fascination with history, keeping records for history, time, and really what it means, the meaning of our life here on Earth. And that's why I end up being so artistic and philosophical and metaphysical and such. But getting back to the business side of this. So it occurs to me I need to make a business plan. Not that I haven't done some planning. I've been doing a lot of content inventory and content auditing and content strategy. I've done a lot of who's my target audience, what is my niche, who are my competitors, where are which social media platforms am I going to market on, and what are my social media strategies going to be, what are my social media posting guidelines going to be, sort of wrapping my mind around all of this. So anyway, I was just thinking last night, I was thinking that I want to be more assertive in interesting my friends and family in what I'm doing. And I was trying to think about what that means. We all have things that we're doing. I am not the most important person in the world. Sometimes I just want to shut myself up and not care about myself at all. When I think about how much worse people have things than I do. I think about I tell you, I had this crazy experience. This was sort of like a sobering and disturbing thing all at once. I should have told this to you sooner, but it comes to me now. So my wife the other day, we were in Madison, New Jersey. I don't know if you've ever been to Madison before. It's about 25 minutes, a half hour east of us here in Basking Ridge. And we're at the grocery store. And this is weird, but almost all of the clientele, almost, not all, but almost all of the clientele was Caucasian. And I think 100% of the employees at the grocery store were black. And I just couldn't help but feel like there was something severely unfair and not right about that kind of disparity. to put it almost like euphemistically. And I just thought that I didn't like this notion, I didn't like this sort of symbol of the black people working for the white people. I don't like this symbol of like any people working for any other kind of people. I like diversity. And so what I was getting, though, was a sense of not diversity, but one demographic doing one thing and another demographic doing another thing. And so I bring that up because I'm just thinking about real concerns that really exist in this time in our society, that the qualms of the white heterosexual male may not be as interesting, may not be as a lot of people have valid hopes that are very important, and there's a lot of injustice. There's a lot of racial disparity right now, inequity. There's a lot of economic inequity. Even driving through the houses in town and in nearby towns, you see some of these houses and you realize, so some people live in these really rather comfortable sized houses, probably too big for my taste even, and yet there are people who are also living in ghettos or in rural shacks. My point being, there is a mad economic disparity in this country that speaks to an issue well beyond Sean O'Connor's desire to be a meaningful podcaster and make a living as a podcaster. And I get that. And there's also the complexity of the fact that we're all really busy in this world. Part of it because of the economic complexities of our times, so that we're all really concerned about money. Sometimes I just fucking hate money because sometimes I feel like that's all the world cares about. I'm not saying that's true, but sometimes I feel that way. Sometimes I feel like all I hear is money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. It's like watching an episode of Charlie Brown when all the adults speak, and instead of hearing want, 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 you hear money, 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 money. Money, 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 sex, money, 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 medicine. Money, 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 sex, money, money, drugs. Money, 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 medicine. Money, 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 drugs. Money, 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 sex. And sometimes it feels like that's all life is. And it's depressing as hell when I get into that trapped metaphysical delusional notion of things. But certainly it makes you think about yourself, right? And it may be there is a big world out there. There are starving children in India. There are starving children in the streets of Philadelphia, San Francisco, out in the countryside, in Alabama, wherever. There are people who are ill and need money for life-saving drugs. I get all of that. Believe me, I do. That's the kind of shit that is part of the reason probably why I'm on Lunesta, so that I can sleep at night. We follow? But I also know that I live for something more than how would I put it? I think the good world, the great world, the thriving world is one where you are able to recognize both the sufferings of others and care for the desires of others and wanting to see them all thrive, but yourself counting in that. So it is important to me to look to it that I also do. Otherwise, right, if I don't succeed economically, then I become some poor guy on the street, right? And I can't have that either. Then I become, worst case scenario, burden on society, or I starve to death or something. Or I work some dead-end job and I'm miserable, and my mental unwellness becomes a burden on society, right? The point is that, in my opinion, we should all try to be happy, and that the universe of greater meaning is the one where we have dreams, where we have high aims, one where we try to do things that are really hard, visions of wonderful creativity. And it doesn't matter what kind it is. It doesn't matter to me. But the point, I think, is to ask yourself, if the world could be such that you could be doing anything with your time, within reason, what would it be? I know it is not unreasonable to try and pursue a podcasting career, to pursue a career in which I have a multimedia content website with a podcast. I know that's not within reason because I know other people do it. And I know other people do it and make a lot of money doing it. Therefore, there's not necessarily a reason why they should be able to and I shouldn't. So I am focusing on what it means to join that crowd, so to speak. But it was also talking about interesting friends and family in what we do. I was a little distraught by paranoid, like, what if those I love the most really don't believe in me and what I'm doing? And not saying that I've gotten that message or not gotten that message, but I'm interested in that topic of people trying to, let's say, get a startup business going. And what is the impact that has on them psychologically, and what is the impact that has on their family psychologically? And certainly, you know that story of the kid wanting to be a lawyer, not a lawyer, like an artist, but the parents wanting him to be a lawyer, or the person who wanted to be an athlete and the parents don't want him to be an athlete, or the parents who tell their kid to go to business school, but the kid really wants to be an architect. My point being that we have our aspirations, and then there are people who have their assessments of the meaning of our aspirations and whether or not they feel the same kind of enthusiasm for our aspirations as we do. Why they may see a case for discouraging those efforts versus why we try to encourage them. Now, my outlook on all of this is to try and find a balance between encouragement and practicality. That is to say, it would not be acceptable to me for someone to say, fuck everything, I'm going to quit my job, therefore have no revenue coming in, no income coming in, and pursue my dream. I mean, if you have money saved, then I think that's a different case. But my point being is I'm not one for being irresponsible. And wouldn't want anyone to think that I am. Though it is the case that I used to be when I was younger. That was part of the reason why I didn't want to go to college when I was younger, was I did have all these sort of entrepreneurial energy, where I wanted to have a website, or I wanted to have a book, or wanted to do this or do that, and basically not work for anybody but be my own, employer kind of concept. But it was irresponsible of me not to get a little bit more education and have a much better attitude and outlook when making that approach. And I get that. But now now I'm really thinking about what it means to be a producer. I don't mean a producer like a movie producer. I mean a producer like to contribute to this economy in some way, shape, or form, and what that means. This has been something that's interested me for a very long time, the question of what it means to be a producer in an economy, as much as a consumer. I do love my coffee. That's like a chorus line to the song of the Sean O'Connor podcast. I love my coffee. So, I'm really wrapping my mind around... So last night I'm thinking about what can I do to make the way that I talk about the public comment podcast and the website and my efforts towards that, and what can I do to make that sound like more intriguing to friends and family and to the world around me. And one of the bits of advice I got reading articles about this, it turns out I'm not the only person who's had this experience, which made me feel great. Like I'm not alone in the world thinking that I'm paranoid, that there's something wrong with me, and that everybody thinks I'm crazy and I'm the only one. It's a thing, apparently, that there are people out there who have these business ideas and they're very enthusiastic about their business ideas, and they fear the discouragement, inadvertent discouragement of, or interpretation of discouragement of those that love them and that they love. And the advice that I got from these articles, one of them was, take your friends and family through the growth and development of what you're doing, and also show them your vision, and also let them in on your business plan. And so I thought, while I'd created a content strategy plan, it occurs to me I could go a little bit more all out and write a bit of a more elaborate business plan. So one of the things that I'm interested in doing, and I'm going to talk you through this because I like to be mad up front about things as much as I can. I'm going to talk you through my business plan too. Was one of the things I'll be up to this week. As I also think about, one of the questions I have is marketing and interesting an audience and what that means. And this is how I get to two questions of aesthetics, but also, again, I don't want to use the word entertainment, but I was thinking about what it means to have an audience. What does it mean to have an audience? What does it mean to ask for an audience? What are you really asking somebody here, right? Forget the part of it where you get paid for it, because that's a whole other thing. Start foundationally. What does it mean to have an audience? It means to say to someone else, hey, would you like to give an hour of your day to listen to what I've got to say? And the first question that some person's going to have is, why the hell should I? I mean, I ask myself that when I'm inundated with ads, marketing. Why should I care? Now, it's very easy when something speaks to like a very visceral need. When you need a medication and only one or two companies supply that medication and you need it, there's not too much of a struggle to market for that. Sex sells quite a lot. I thought as like a marketing ploy, I could just go on a series of episodes, I could just write on sex and do an experiment and see how many more people, just by virtue of bringing up that topic, how many more people might I actually draw in just by doing that as sort of sociological experiment? Because the way we perceive things, and I mean, we're all human. You hear the word sex and you're like, what? Sex? I mean, that's how some people are. And advertisers know it because they use sex in all of their advertising. I mean, I try specifically, actually, to be honest, I try almost never to talk about that topic because I talked about it enough when I was younger. I mean, I have my philosophical questions about it. There will be a time and place probably to address the topic. Interested in thoughts on all things, That's not a topic that I'm closed to talking about, but not my number one interest these days. Not that my point being, I'm very interested right now in questions of economy. I'm very interested in questions of aesthetics. And I'm very interested in what's going on politically in our world right now. Those are the kind of things that... and I'm also interested in the stuff I'm reading. Like, I'm very interested in autobiography, memoir, personal essay, and its relationship to drawing sort of philosophical ideas. That's really the gist of what I do. I believe that's like sort of at the heart of this whole thing. So, for example, I'm reading the autobiography of St. Augustine slowly. I'm also reading the essays of Virginia Woolf. There's someone who I really enjoy. Virginia Woolf she's one of those writers, we're talking about how we all have these list of things we always want to read and we never do. Virginia Woolf is one of those writers I've always meant to check out and never did. And then I was just doing some Google research on things and her name just kept popping up. And I thought, okay, it's time to start reading me some Virginia Woolf. I was able to get the entire works of Virginia Woolf on ebook for $1. $1. So a major part of me said, how the hell could I possibly say no to that? As I think about it, I actually feel guilty, though, because someone's making money off of that book, and $1 is just not a lot, in my opinion. That's another concern I have about our economy is, are we paying the proper prices for things? They seem a little bit out of whack. Right? Take, for example, the men's soccer player versus the women's soccer players. The men make a lot more than the women. Not fair. Take a look at how much they're charging for some medications at like 1,000% of what it costs to make. Not fair. Think about how much people make at the grocery store. Not enough to afford even, really, housing. Not fair. While the person who owns the grocery store has this great take-home of hundreds of thousands at the very least, probably. Not fair. Think about all these people who are doing blogs on the internet and not getting paid for it. Put their time, blood, sweat, and tears into making good content for us to read and learn. And maybe they make a little bit of revenue off of the ads, maybe. Not necessarily fair or cool or right that it happens that way. In terms of like properly valuing things. And I'm even concerned, honestly, I'm concerned about things like how little Netflix actually costs. Don't get me wrong. I'm kind of happy that it's not so expensive as a consumer on the surface. And they have a pretty huge budget. Like billions of dollars they spend. So that's a lot of money that they've got their hands on. And I don't really feel bad for them in that context at all. Look at Amazon. Amazon seems to own the world. Amazon, you have to wonder, is there like an antitrust conversation to be had about Amazon? No disrespect to Jeff Bezos. I'm happy that he's so successful, but Amazon just seems to be like running the world. It's almost not literally, but wow, Amazon is on everything. Amazon delivers just about everything. Amazon now does Whole Foods. Amazon does entertainment and media. Amazon it's certainly the Walmart of the internet, except it has higher quality products than Walmart, but it's like this super everything supplier on the internet. I always get concerned with everything suppliers because you're supplying everything. How does that work into competition? How many people can compete with everything providers? Makes me a little concerned. And so getting to the question of like, how much does it cost for one person to get a month's subscription to Amazon or Netflix? Okay, it's like $12, right? And how is that $12 distributed? What does it go to logistically? I don't know anything about the marketing and the budgeting of Amazon, but or Netflix. But okay, how much of that goes to the actors? How much of that goes to the writers? How much of that goes to the tech crew, the videographers or cinematographers, and the editors, and all of the many, many, many people it takes just to make one really high quality show? And how much of that then goes to, how does it get distributed beyond that? And how do you decide those percentages? And are they the proper percentages? Keep in mind, I think it would be one thing if Amazon and Netflix didn't have so many shows. But Netflix has a lot of shows. Some of them only last a season. And so my thought is, because you're paying so many people to do so much, which is cool in the sense that everybody's got work, right? My question, though, is everybody making enough, really, akin to the work that they're doing for the company, based on what they charge us? I don't know. I'm also interested in how Hollywood is making its money these days. It's not exactly, first of all, it's not exactly cheap to go. That's an interesting thing. In contrast to, this is where I'm saying, like, it's the way prices are ascribed to things is confusing to me as someone who's not an economist and as someone who doesn't study the market as a specialist. I'm interested in being a consumer, though, and being an informed consumer, just like I'm interested in being an informed voter in my politics. I'm also interested in being an informed consumer of things. As a consumer as such, again, from a more philosophical perspective. So what does it cost, like $8 to $12 to go to a movie? Versus for one movie at the theater, or you could wait for it to become available on Netflix with your like $12 a month subscription. Less incentive to go to the movies, especially if you know you're going to be tempted to then spend more than is necessary on food and drink, most of which is junk, by the way, and not good for you. And there's a question about really what is the ethics behind selling crap food and junk food and making mad profits off of turning people obese and sick and diabetic and all of that, right? So you know there's going to be more incentive for more people to just hang on Netflix and Amazon, and less incentive for people to go to the movies right off the bat. And the Netflix binge-worthy show is just more intriguing than movies are, I think, for a lot of people, compared to like 20 years ago. So my point being that a product in theaters has got to be losing money in contrast to the product made, like, let's say, directly for Netflix. And so I'm curious in wrapping my mind around all those kind of things, too, and how that impacts our economy as a wider picture and our role in where we fit, not just in terms of economy, but like in terms of values that we put on things. I mean, values like, okay, that's worth this amount of money to me. That's worth this amount of money to me. That kind of thinking is very interesting to me. So that's going to be it from me today, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you so very much for taking the time to listen. I would just leave you, I think, with a concluding thought as we're talking about product here. One of the things that I think is interesting about this public comment series is that because it's a podcast, it's designed as a podcast so you can watch the video archives for people who are interested in that kind of thing. It's almost like this interesting cross between a long audiobook and a radio show. It's got this, that's how interesting the world is that we're living in, the way it's changing. I was saying to my wife, because things are now more multimedia, number one, and because people now have more access to producing different kinds of multimedia files, it seems to me we're going to be living in an economy we're going to be living in ultimately a much more file-driven economy. And how do you sell a file, and how do you distribute a file, and how do you make money off of a file, and how do we find sort of fairness in a file economy? And with that, I will say that's that. So have a great day, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly, I would welcome you to check out I would welcome you to pay for a monthly subscription of Public Comment. I do this 5 to 6 days a week unless some crazy thing stops me from doing so. So if you want to contribute as much as $1 a month, you can by going to Patreon, patron.podbean.com/public comment. Of course, if you check out publiccomment.blog, that's publiccomment.blog, there are also links easy to find that will help you contribute to the cause there. And also, again, check out publiccomment.blog. You can check out my lexicon, where I sort of use the words I like to use in my basic building concepts. There are other essays explaining why I do what I do and why I think what I think. And there are vlogs to talk about other things that don't fit into the context necessarily of this podcast, etc. So again, thank you so much. It's been real. Let me know your thoughts. Leave comments. Chat with me. Maybe we'll do a special together. That would be cool too. Let me know. Enjoy the day. Happy thoughts. Whatever. I still haven't come up with the perfect greeting and the perfect closing yet. But thank you so much for your time. Keep it real, as I like to say. That's how I like to close things. Keep it real, as I like to say. Have a great day. Bye.